So we were doing this pre-season, and we had quite a bit of freedom about what to choose. So I chose the topic, what are those things that are worth dying for? And within research of this article, as well as reading the article, I learned about single.
Welcome to the Rich Dawn, where eternal beatitude begins in this life. I'm Kyle Dean, and today I have with me Mike Keller, a young adult from the Western New York area, a member of the Dynamis Western New York ministry, a devotee of Saint Maria Goretti, as well as the leader of this year's Dynamis Exodus 90 Frat. Mike, how are you today?
I'm good, Kyle. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, 100%. Really excited to get into this, man, because for the last few years now, we've been involved in young adult ministry and just really setting souls on fire with our love for the Lord. And to the point where now you're leading, as we mentioned, you're leading a whole frat of a bunch of men who have answered the call to really go on that spiritual exodus together, and it's just been incredible seeing you at work. So we're gonna get into all that. Let's start by talking about a little bit about like your faith backstory and what led you to get involved in ministry at the level that you're at now.
Thanks, Kyle. I guess it's been a big almost journey kind of to where I am right now. Kind of I think so. I always grew up being Catholic. My dad was Catholic, and my mom was also Catholic. So I kind of been going to church growing up when I was younger. But really, kind of after I was getting confirmed, I kind of had almost like a gap in my faith, kind of for a couple of years, and I was able to be brought back into the faith again, and kind of it kind of had its ups and downs, and it really just kind of led me to just kind of being almost a lukewarm Catholic. And I was able to find Dynamis in 2022, which is pretty good timing when I was finishing up college, and was able to really start pushing me to go deeper in my faith, and really kind of helped me to even be doing Exodus not once, but twice, and one time as a leader. And I'll tell you, I first heard of Exodus in 2020. It was actually, I was on the March for Life in 2020, and I heard of Exodus. It was kind of one of the other people that was going with us, and they were mentioning like cold showers and all the things they were giving up. And to be honest, I thought they were crazy. I was like,
you have to be a little crazy to want to do it.
I was like, I don't know about that one. I'm kind of March for Life, doing my thing, kind of, marching for the unborn, really good cause. But like Exodus, I don't know. I think that's kind of too crazy down the line. And now, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm in the thick of things, as well as just actually leading a fraternity to do so.
Yeah.
And kind of actually almost took a couple of years to actually get into it. To 2022, I was thinking about doing Exodus. This would have been outside of the Dynamis Fraternity, since I wasn't introduced at the time.
Right.
But I kind of didn't actually follow through because I didn't think I could commit the whole thing. So I was like, okay, maybe we'll do this in the following year or something. And 2023 came around, and kind of had almost that back half of the year with Dynamis that I was just kind of thinking, okay, here's the time, here's to go, like here we're doing it. Yes. And then I did it. I think really just the backstory, and to kind of get into the details. I think we'll be getting into that a little bit later about kind of some of those times where I was at, back then a little bit more.
Yeah.
But kind of here and now, I've just kind of been almost accelerated off a ramp here, kind of in 2023 here, and hoping to do the same in this year in 2024. So.
100%, man. Wow. So it almost sounds like it's been like a bit of a roller coaster. Like you went from being raised in the faith to having that moment at confirmation, where of course that's like our adult yes in a certain sense, right? It's like the final confirmation of what it meant when we were baptized. And of course, for those of us who grew up in the faith our whole lives, oftentimes that's as an infant. Was that the case for you? Or
yeah, so I was baptized in the faith. I was at the same church probably for 18, 19 years, kind of from...
Beautiful.
It was great to be there for the 19 years, and then just kind of I don't know, it was almost like I was going through a phase trying to find, and this kind of connected back to just me also learning about the Latin Mass at that time. Just kind of,
no kidding.
I kind of was going to Our Lady of Pompeii, the church was, for those in the Western New York region, kind of been there for my whole life, and then just kind of, it was actually the summer of 2022, so it was kind of, I guess the summer I already was introduced to Dynamis, that I was actually just parish hopping. I was kind of like...
Right.
one week I'd go to Our Lady Pompeii, one week I would go to like St. Gabe's, week I would go somewhere else, and then I'd be at St. Anthony's. So it'd be like
Roman Catholic, as they say.
yeah. So I was kind of doing that for like a whole summer, which kind of surprised me if I really think about it. I was like, well, and then, yeah, I don't know, just kind of got into St. Anthony's and the Latin Mass and just kind of felt like that was right to where I was going to be. And I just kind of, from there, I was just kind of going to St. Anthony's every week after and attending Latin Mass. So it was just kind of, yeah, just a roller coaster, and then kind of getting to that point there, just kind of
leveling off
in terms of like where I'm feeling comfortable there, but obviously still like not leveling off in the spiritual growth, because it's kind of
because you're either gaining ground or losing ground,
right? And it was definitely gaining ground when I look back at it, and it was good. It was good because I finally felt like I had that like the gaining ground and actually keeping it instead of gaining it and then losing it, kind of, and just keep gaining. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool to learn about the Latin Mass. It's still, a young age.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of young adult years ahead of you. And I know for me, it wasn't until a little bit later. And I remember thinking, like, how did I never even know this existed?
So, can I ask what year you learned about it?
What year did I learn about it? I don't know if I can boil it down to the exact year. Because I know I read about it, and then I know when I went, I started going early 2015.
Okay.
So that's when I started going, but I heard about it within the couple of years before that. And, it was like a seed planted, and then there came a point where I had an interest in it. And then it was just like, it really, really spoke to me, because it's like, this is how our ancestors prayed.
Right.
For like most of church history. In some way, shape, or form, right? And so there's just something very primal about it. There's something very, it's just transcendent. And I think that's obviously, you can tell you look at all the stats of what's going on in the church today, that it's, it really does speak to the young adult population for some reason. It's just fascinating.
I think the big thing that I saw immediately going there is reverence, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
And I think in terms of what the Eucharist, we know what the Eucharist is. It's like the full body of our Lord. And I guess just showing that utmost respect to it, I think that was probably helpful for a lot of the younger communities, is they're kind of getting taught that Jesus is in the Eucharist, but maybe they don't see it as much as in unfortunately normal Mass and Novus Ordo. So when they go to the Latin Mass and they kind of see the utmost respect, kind of where you see the priest is only using the couple fingers,
right.
That I guess is almost ordained to him when he gets ordained
hands are consecrated as part of the holy orders. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then just even like when the Eucharist would fall on the ground, they stop, like the priest stops handing out communion. They like get one of those I can't know exactly the names, but basically a towel to like wipe away where Christ fell on the ground, and just kind of like
you have to venerate the Lord.
Yeah.
And this happens in Novus Ordo parishes too. Unfortunately, sometimes anytime, no matter where it happens, when you see it not be given the attention that it deserves, it's kind of like an abuse in that regard.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of, it just feels a lot more, especially what I kind of realized was receiving Christ on the tongue too. Yeah. I think when you're younger, you just kind of be like, maybe it's the lack of really truly understanding what it means, but you kind of like, I don't know, when I was younger and went to Mass, kind of people received on the tongue and kind of like, oh, like I don't do that. Like it's a little weird kind of, but then when you actually like realize and get into the meats of it, like what it means, it's like, how can I not?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, that's just, been something. And then just even kind of trying to do that when you do go to Novus Ordo too, kind of receiving on the tongue still there, kind of instead of, shifting the ways to kind of maybe receive it on the tongue one time and then receive it on the hand other, just kind of encourage receiving it more on the tongue, just to show like our Lord the most utmost respect,
Yeah, absolutely. And I can empathize, man, because I, as a Thomistic, philosopher, theologian, in the way that I gravitate to understanding these things, the Summa Theologiae is so satisfying because of the way that it systematizes the whole faith. And, St. Thomas Aquinas talks in there about how, in the old rite of baptism, you have the exorcism of the tongue, with the salt, the blessed salt. There's 3 exorcisms as opposed to just one with the new rite, and that corresponds to the laity's tongue being consecrated to receive our Lord.
Wow.
And St. Thomas Aquinas gets into that, whereas the hands of the priest are consecrated to be able to touch the host, right? So there's like a whole theology behind that. Now, that being said, there are things are done differently in certain Eastern rites in the church.
Right.
And of course, we know with the Novus Ordo now, it's they say that they wanted to do a ressourcement to the early church. You hear of St. Cyril of Jerusalem's quote, one of the early church fathers, who talks about, reverentially receiving in the hand. So
Sure.
that's also there. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Redemptionis Sacramentum that John Paul II promulgated on March 25th, 2004, it makes extremely clear what was already the case, but it's codified there that the laity have the right to receive our Lord whichever way they choose. That no bishop on earth, not even the Pope himself, has the right to take that away, because that's a divine law right. That comes straight from God. So yeah, it's amazing to hear that these are the things that really kind of touched you as you really solidified in your faith as a young man. So leading up to that point, though, you mentioned, before you learned about the Latin Mass, before you learned about Dynamis, that, it was kind of roller coaster. Back in 2020, March for Life, you're like, these guys are kind of nuts for wanting to do Exodus. You know, like, I feel like there's at least 2 kinds of people. Like, one that are like, they hear about the cold showers and they very begrudgingly accept because they want to better themselves. And then you have like the truly nuts, like maybe me, like that are just like, yeah, man, asceticism's for asceticism's sake. Let's go.
I mean, I think later on, the asceticism's for the asceticism's sake is kind of like, okay, like getting excited for penance. And it's like,
yes,
I'll kind of get back to what you said in a second, but just I thought of it now, like getting excited for penance. It's kind of like in Advent, I actually did, I did like a set of penances where just every single day I would take on a different penance. And it was kind of like weird and fun in a way, kind of like, how can I suffer today? And like, I got really excited for sleeping on the ground. But then the funny part is you get really excited to do it. And then you're about to do it. You're like, this is so exciting. And then you're actually doing it, like, this sucks. Like, like this absolutely sucks, man. Like, why was I so excited for this? But then you're like, well, when I look at like, it's literally making up for my wrongs that I've done.
Right.
Kind of like when you look at it in that way in penance, like how can you not do more? So it's just kind of like, yeah, I just kind of like got really, really, really excited to do that. And just kind of like you said, like definitely in 2020, no, it was kind of like, I was a whole different set of things. It was kind of like, yeah, I'm doing kind of things that I'm doing, but why would I do something so like demanding? Even just kind of like hearing no TV, no video games. Not that I, did that a lot, but I was like, well, I don't want to give those up. It's kind of like, that would be a lot,
I wish you would give up video games more, man, after that one, after a recent tournament for yours truly's birthday. And I, in humility, must admit, I was number 2. You're looking at number 1 right here, man. And I had no idea. You're like a pool shark with it. You're like, I play some video games. Wham! It's Mario Kart.
It's mostly Mario Kart though, because I don't go and play like on the PC or anything. It's usually handheld stuff.
Okay.
So it's not like anything. We played. That's why when we played Super Smash Bros, you and Alex were destroying me, and I kind of kept them destroyed. So
Alex Field from Rich Don.
Yeah.
Earlier episode, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I guess to get back to the Exodus kind of topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just kind of, I guess you were asking more about the, how did I find myself into like changing my mind on it, or?
Yeah, anything that you want to share about like, where you came from in your faith journey versus really taking, like, what was that moment where you said, I'm really going all in as an adult on this, and what was it like leading up to that?
Okay, well, I think it's going to start with probably, if Exodus starts, it's like a program that starts in January, as you know. So then I guess some of the viewers, it kind of goes from 90 days
from Easter
to Easter.
It's been January last few years.
Yeah. So started January 1st this year. Maybe last year started January 9th or so.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I've always been kind of...
You're pretty good with dates like me, man.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to my numbers and math major sort of thing.
Yep, makes sense.
But like looking at it last year, I think it was kind of... I felt like, I don't know, I was kind of in the like near the end of it. I was maybe thinking about it more and more, but I wasn't really committed until like maybe like a week or two before it, if I remember correctly on my end. But just kind of like earlier in that year, I kind of started picking up the daily rosaries in 2022.
Nice.
It is actually courteous to hear. We had a discussion one night, maybe July or August or so,
in Dynamis,
and just kind of seeing like the benefits and the rewards of the rosary and all that, and just like the increase of, it was more later that I devoted like the increase of love to Mary, but just seeing those benefits and like possibility to do that, I said, why am I not doing this? So I just started saying, okay, well, let me just take it up. Let me see what it's like. And from August of 2022 till now, I've only missed one day. So
praise God, man.
Yeah, praise God. So, it was just really truly started the path to actually really elevating in my faith, kind of, I felt. Because I started planning my days around when I could do the rosary, or at least in my mind thinking, all right, rosary, I got all this stuff going on, I'm going to have to do the rosary in the evening. Or I got all this stuff going on, I'm going to have to do the rosary in the morning. Just kind of making my day around setting that. And I think that started the path towards really wanting to say yes to more things in my faith. So leading up to that, the Exodus decision, I saw that the spiritual gains and the spiritual growth is possible, and just kind of like continuing falling in sin and continue falling and not being as good as I want to be. I just said, well, okay, I think I could do this. And the only thing I needed to do, I remember, is I said, well, like the meetings are going to be Friday nights and I need to get off work.
Right.
Because my job, unfortunately, some days I have to work a little bit later, and we had the meetings, I think, set for 6:30 last year, and I just kind of
7:30.
It was a time where I think it was 6:30, because there was a time where I was like, okay, like I need to tell work like, hey, no Fridays for like 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is going to be like.
Thank goodness they were on board with that, right?
Yeah.
Your state in life allowed for it.
Yeah. So I was lucky to bring it up, and they were able to accommodate. And I was like, well, if I say no now, it's just like personal, like scaredness or something. Like it's like I got like clearance at work to do this. I got like clearance in like my own set of mind. It's just like let's do this, and kind of like let's see what comes from it. And I think really what was transformative is kind of identifying all the different things that I thought weren't problems that actually were problems. I think one of the big things was just kind of that I don't really do now is just like TV and or like YouTube. I think YouTube was the
big one.
Yeah.
So to contextualize for our viewers and listeners, right now we just slipped into like actually doing the Exodus 90 program, which is, prayer, asceticism, and the Fraternity. The prayer includes reading through the book of Exodus and a little bit more scripture throughout the 90 days leading up to Easter. It's like a double Lent. And the Fraternity is, for our sake, it was getting together on those Fridays. It's like once a week you got to get together with your frat, and you also have an accountability partner to lean on. And all of it is to become successful at the asceticisms,
right,
which is that third pillar. And I mean, it's, like you said, it's like no television, no unnecessary internet. The cold showers are in there. That's usually like gets people's attention at first, but it's not even the hardest one if you just really commit to that one. Like it's the things that you add all of these asceticisms. There's like 12 to 15 of them or so. Like no alcohol, no snacking between meals, no sweets, all this different stuff, fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays in the Catholic tradition. And like you put all of it together, and it's designed to help you to identify your attachments in life, right? Like to be an ascetic is to take the path of voluntary self-denial. And so that's why they're called the asceticisms. And so anyways, so you were going bit by bit and identifying your pain points. Yeah.
And I didn't really think, like, I kind of came in with a sense of like, all right, like maybe this is my big issue I need to work on. And then I'm like, well, there's all these other issues. Like I didn't think of these. And it's kind of like to just see those really change and trying to like basically transform how I went beyond. Kind of like, I think I was telling you for some time period afterward, I'm like, how, like after doing such a program, I kind of almost wanted to continue a lot of those disciplines afterward, and said like, how can I ever, like I just felt like, how can I ever go back to what it was before?
Yes.
And it was just kind of like, I almost felt like for a while, like, yeah, Exodus is the only way. But then it's kind of like, okay, I think enjoying some of those like sweets or alcohol. I don't drink, but just kind of like some of the other asceticisms that you're taking away from Exodus, just enjoying them more appropriately afterwards.
Right.
It actually means a lot more is to not indulge on it on every single day basis, rather than taking it when it's like special moments. And like, I kind of realized that a lot. And I think YouTube is just it's a big thing that I had, where I just kind of always would plug in of some sort. It could be something at work and I could just plug in and play something, and in the background, or my free time I would just plug into YouTube or something, or throw on the TV at home or something, throw on either TV or YouTube or like some other streaming app, and just kind of like plug in and like go. It's
like the millennial Gen Z like way of gaining information nowadays.
Right.
YouTube's like the number 2 website on the internet.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I really just identified like, hey, this is a problem. And I kind of just realized as I kept going within Exodus that like, why do I want to continue this when I'm out of it? So even after last Exodus,
you already, a priest told me one time, he's like, you already crossed the Red Sea. Why would you go back?
Right. So it was a little bit of struggle at first. I think afterwards, trying to rebalance and say like, all right, maybe I'll try to use YouTube here and there, a little bit here and there. And I said like, no, done. Like, we're done. Like, I kind of deleted it off my phone, rarely use it. Like, I guess if I was going to go watch this episode, I can pop on YouTube and then pop right off. I usually might just listen to the podcast app, but like, it's like done, which kind of surprised me. And even just like some of the streaming apps, what I actually found, and this is maybe something that some of the guys could struggle with on Exodus, is on Sundays, you can take back 2 disciplines or so.
Yes.
And I found myself
We've had years where you take back any of them.
Yeah. I think that's
kind of... 2 is very prudent.
Right. Because it kind of doesn't expose you. Because if you take everything back, then that Monday is going to suck.
Yeah. You set yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
And I think it was very wise of you too to rotate the 2 you take back.
Yes. Because
that was very smart.
This is why. Because of when I was last year, I just kept taking back TV.
The same thing.
And it was just kind of like...
most guys do that.
Yeah, and it was just like, oh, I'm watching the playoffs here, like the NFL playoffs, like NASCAR season starts, watching NASCAR, like throw up on streaming, like stream a couple different, videos, whether it be on YouTube or like a different site. And none of it was like bad, of course. It was just like, I just found like, wow, I just like wasted my time.
Yeah.
And I kept going back to it, that I think really kind of, even it was after Exodus that I like made this like situation of like, no, like, I got to stop this. Like, and then going into Exodus this year on Sundays, I've been trying to basically rotate them and tell the guys to rotate them as well, because it's kind of like, you'll realize if you keep wanting to go back to the same thing, it's actually a problem. And you need that time to root it out. So,
right. And
it was actually very good this year, like the playoffs. I didn't really watch any, and I was okay. And
you made it, dude?
I made it. I was like, really surprised. There was some temptations of like, oh, I really want to watch the Bills game right now.
Right.
But like, even one of the Bills game in the playoffs, I didn't even watch it.
Really?
Yeah, it was the Steelers versus Bills, and I would have thought that would be the one.
You're like setting the bar. This is the 5th Dynamis Frat, and I mean, we were always pretty lenient year over year. Like, hey, as long as the Bills are still in the playoffs, you're allowed to watch it, even if it's on a Saturday.
I did let the guys do that because it was on a Monday, because it was the snow.
Right.
But I had plans to go to the hockey game with my girlfriend Julia. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go to the hockey game, and then I'm gonna go like enjoy the time that I'm with her.
Right.
Football's completely off the table, and that's kind of what was really nice about it this season, is just kind of almost in a different like mindset. Like, I'm doing a courtship in this season. Right. Last season it was kind of single guy. So it's like, single guy. It's like, all right, I'll watch the football game.
Your why has evolved.
So it's evolved this time now. So it's just like, it's been so nice. And I was kind of surprised at myself that like, it's not even been like a temptation, like to watch. Like, it was a little bit of temptations. I want to watch the game.
Right.
But then it's like different. It's like, no, like I'm discerning marriage here. Like, this is like what I want. This is kind of like where I'm hopefully going. And it's just like, like this is all first and like all that stuff's last. And I think that's been very helpful with like the disciplines this year, is kind of like, I haven't found myself on some other feast days. So occasionally there's like feast days where you would get to take 2 disciplines back as well.
Oh, like first class feasts.
Yeah. So just kind of, I guess Candlemas, so aka the purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or the presentation of our Lord in the temple. We get to take back 2 disciplines that day.
February 2nd. Also happens to be Feast of Our Lady of Good Success.
Yeah, it's loaded that day.
That day is excellent.
That day's loaded.
Yes. Birthday of this channel, actually.
There we go.
We did a devotion to Our Lady in that regard.
Yeah, so like those days you can take back 2 disciplines, and there was quite a bit in January, and I actually found myself not really doing that. Like kind of like if it didn't fit, I actually found it was a weird scenario one of these times. I found myself at the store. And I took back sweets early in the day because I got some like pancakes for breakfast.
Yeah.
I found myself in the store, like looking around trying to find candy. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Does it all like rely that I'm like here in the store, I'm about to use my money so I can try to like stuff something down tonight? I just left the store. I was like, wow.
Yes. And not to mention one of the disciplines is no unnecessary purchases.
Yes. And that, I think that would constitute as an unnecessary purchase at the time.
Sure.
Going to the store just solely to buy this for like consumption in like an hour.
Yes.
So I kind of found myself.
You're breaking the cycle of just being a good consumer, as they say. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
more to life than that.
Yeah. So just kind of like, I don't know, dealing with those temptations. And then I think just since we're on talking about this Exodus and last Exodus, last Exodus coming in the mindset of just wanting to improve myself a lot. And one of the virtues I wanted to really pull big on was chastity last year.
Yeah.
And I've improved so much. And this year, my virtue of choice going into this was charity.
Wow.
So just trying to be charitable.
You went right to the top. That's the greatest of all virtues, as St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13. And it's also the virtue that is also a representation of God himself.
Right.
It's the greatest of all virtues, man.
Yeah. Well, then, going for that, and then especially how that kind of aligns with where I'm discerning in this time period too, with a courtship. If I'm going to get married, kind of being totally charitable with everything. So it's just been something I've been trying to work on a lot this year.
Yes.
And that's why I'm just trying to be like open and charitable with my time in every single area that I can. And what I kind of realized too is just like trusting in God's timeline, because I kind of felt, kind of going back to my faith journey earlier, I kind of felt like a lot of my prayers were, I want this, 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 and this. And then you're like, that's not how you're supposed to pray.
Right.
You're not supposed to pray like kind of saying, like, not necessarily demanding, but like kind of to do that. And my prayer life kind of shifted where it's more like, I'm asking for like virtues and like growth in spiritual goods, and it's more like thanksgiving in my prayers of like, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for that, kind of things like that.
And a lot of this is the stuff that we train up on with Father Ripperger in the Dynamis ministry, right? It's like know the 7 heavenly virtues and all the sub virtues, recognize the importance of prayer and targeting those specific virtues in your prayer, because prayer begets what it signifies, right? God loves specificity. And if you need proof of that, just go right to that book of Exodus, right? Like he's like, this is exactly how I'm to be worshipped. This many cubits, this like, you know what I mean? So it's not scrupulous in that regard. It's God expects nothing less than the best.
Right.
If we put our effort in, our part in, because we're made in his image and likeness, we're supposed to be like him. So it's amazing, man. You're showing a living example of how, to shift to that more mature mindset. And it goes back to the prayer life too, right? Like we've done the mental prayer exercises in Dynamis, where we talk about, there's 4 steps to mental prayer, which is the, level 2 of 9, where you enter into the presence of the divine, and then you do the body of the meditation, whatever it is. And then you do a little bit of petition at the end, right? Ask God for stuff. But then how do we always close it out? The resolution, right? And the resolution is that point where you're like, okay, God, this is me doing my part. This is a 2-way relationship. I don't just ask things of you like a petulant child, right? Like, so that's literally it, man. That's how we grow as saints.
Yeah. And I kind of saw it almost grow, because I think like before I was kind of like, I want this, this, and this, and this. So I grown in prayer like that. But some of the things that I like doubted per se, because there was times back then when I was not as good at my spiritual life, I kind of doubted like, how am I ever going to get over this sin? Or how am I ever going to like grow in like spiritual growth? Like, how is this ever possible?
Right.
And I looked at it in that timeline, and I looked at it in my own timeline, saying like, okay, like, you know, a month from now, like, is this possible or not? And I kind of felt like no. So I kind of like doubted that it was even possible to begin with. And that's like a fault kind of like on me to say that like God is way more powerful. He's the most powerful thing in existence. And he works on his own timeline, and those things that I had doubts there, I just need to trust and, you know, ask for those things in prayer and like give myself up in those ways, and God will give. And I kind of saw that grow, because there's a lot of times where I look back and say like, how could I've ever done this or do this or beat this, kind of things like that. And I look at myself now and I'm saying, well, what did I do? I just trusted in God and I gave it onto his timeline.
Wow.
And I felt like that. And now, you know, sometimes you still get those doubts, kind of like,
sure.
It's upsetting.
As
kinda,
you mature, sometimes the challenges get bigger, slightly more complex sometimes. I mean, God is simple, but, you know, the devil likes to make things complex.
Yeah.
And, you know, so sometimes you have to be on guard for those things, because, you know, the spiritual warfare increases with an increase in maturity, sanctity, holiness, whatever it might be, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like just trusting that God will conquer those like the demon there, and like he can and he will.
Absolutely.
So it's just a matter of like why, like, and I've already seen it. So like, why am I like second guessing it now?
Yeah, can't doubt like, now.
I've already seen it, so like I'm doubting now. What does it, you know? Right. So it just kind of, that's been a lot of a big thing on the spiritual growth side too, just like letting that, you know, grow in me. Kind of. And then it's just when that grows in there, then there's less and less fear and less like worries and doubts.
Well, I just have to say, man, thank you again for your witness here. And I really just want to commend you and your level of maturity. You know, you're still in your young 20s. And yet, you know, I want to point out a couple of things that you've said so far in your testimony that are just really, really interesting to hone in on. Like, one is, you know, I just really enjoyed, I reached a point where I just want to do this penance and like, you know, put the pebble in whatever in the shoe. And when I'm, you know, sleeping, laying down, like, I feel like somebody like listening in, like that's never heard of that before, is going to think like what you thought in 2020 about cold showers, right? That sounds nuts, but it's not. Yeah. It's like, it's a fundamentally different way of looking at life. It's realizing like, you know, the world isn't revolved around me, and, you know, I'm not the center of the universe. God is. And my responsibility in life is to become more like him. And when I realized that there's an eternal beatitude waiting for me, you know, should I do my part, faith and works, right? And to just recognize that all of the penances, all of the sacrifices that we can make in this life, they're fleeting. They're like, it's the least I can do in exchange for that, right? Like that, you see this in the language of the saints throughout the centuries. They, you know, they talk about, I think St. Teresa of Avila and others say like, I would die 1,000 deaths if I knew what I know now in terms of that, my level of experiential awareness of God, right? In those high levels of prayer. Like it's just not, and then you talk about doubting the little things. It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's perspective in one sense. So but the fact that you're already cognizant of that's really impressive. You know, the fact that, you know, you're talking about, I just started taking on the rosary and then I realized I only missed one day ever. Did you double up the next day?
Yeah.
So, I mean, even then, right? Like it's not on the pay, even when you're consecrated to Our Lady, like, you know, because you have to be careful of swinging the pendulum too far the other way too, like scruples. Like you get some Catholics, they don't realize, like even St. Louis de Montfort and his works say, like, unless you took some special private vow, which you should never do without like a spiritual director or your pastor involved or whatever, it's not even on the pain of sin to miss a rosary. Although if you're going to consecrate yourself to Our Lady, you should go into it knowing that that's like part of the territory, right? And we've talked about this offline before, right? Like it's a love language. And once you realize it's like that personal relationship component and it's not like a box to check, it becomes like a sweet and pious light devotion as opposed to some like heavy yoked thing. So I wanted to point all these things out, man, because like you are on such an incredible trajectory and path that I think sometimes people twice your age or more like may be blessed just to discover these ideas for the first time.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just it gives all of us hope for the next generation that, you know, this stuff, you know, lights souls on fire here in the 21st century.
Yeah, and I feel blessed. I think I'm only 23, and to know that I've got hopefully.
You think, or you know you're 23?
No, I know I'm 23. But to think that I have maybe like 60, 70 more years.
God willing, right?
And yeah, God willing, and if
Who
I
knows
saw
with
the
all
growth,
this technology, what they're gonna.
Nah, I don't want to.
How long?
I don't know if I want a chip in my brain. I don't know about that one. So.
You were thinking what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, no, thank you to that.
I feel you, man.
But yeah, I mean, if I have as much spiritual growth as I did last year, and you have that same every year or more,
making gains,
you know, like
in the spiritual gym.
Yeah, so doing the workouts there more.
Yes.
So yeah, I do feel very blessed at a young age, and I think what I actually wanted to add in terms of when you were talking about like the love for Mary, kind of what I realized more during my consecration was I kind of felt like I was almost only going to Mary in times of prayer, which was like daily prayer, right?
Sure.
But I wanted Mary to be more on my mind just throughout the day. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of faulting at this. So I kind of actually set up something that I do. I told some of the guys in Exodus, but might as well just share it to everyone here.
Yes.
Is devoting, I guess, the top of the hours when you can to Mary or to Jesus. Just kind of when I see a top of the hour, the first thing I think of is Mary or Jesus, and I try to say a prayer. Now, I didn't put any bounds on anything, right? Because you don't want to say like every single hour I need to do this because, you know, like that's not physically possible. I think you can't do that.
And you already have the divine office, right?
Yeah.
Some hours are holier than others.
Right. So just kind of trying to get that in there. And yeah, right. Might be some of the top hours I only have 1 or 2 minutes. So I can say that prayer kind of as a layman, kind of saying, okay, it's maybe 2 p.m. or something. And I'll take a second here to say a couple of Hail Marys, or at least think of Mary and like kind of conversate that and just kind of do that throughout the day. Because before I just realized, oh, I wake up, pray all the day, rosary, rest of the day, night, and pray. That's like 3 times I prayed. I was like, well, that's not, when I got to that level, I'm like, that's not acceptable. Like I need to do more. And if it's just something small throughout the day, periodically, and the top of the hours kind of really helped me to do that easier, kind of facilitate that. I see a number and 2 zeros on the clock. I'm thinking, and then obviously, if I can, it's 6, 12, and 6 doing the Angelus as well. It's a little bit more, structured in those times compared to maybe what I do at the top of the hour. But usually at the top of the hours, I just maybe say a couple Hail Marys. It could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 5, but could have some dialogue with it too. Just kind of trying to build that into my schedule. And I was very happy that I've kind of got that in there because I've kind of got that mindset on lockdown now.
Which is smart because when you get into these prayer devotions, you have 2 big things that you have to be on guard against, which are distractions and dryness, right? So with distractions, that might be where you get like, you kind of devolve from doing the rosary to the Marian Psalter, which is you're praying the prayers, but you're not really meditating on them, right? So that could be distraction. It could be, just getting a little too familiar with the roteness of it, but without as much relationship, right? And then, of course, dryness. I mean, dryness is just a part of advancing in the prayer life, right? Asceticism and, God willing, mysticism, right? If you're hitting levels 5 through 9 in prayer. And, with dryness, it's like, that's just God, as we know from Father Ripperger, he says, taking away the spiritual cookies, right? The consolation cookies, where you have to, to love the God of consolations, but not the consolations of God.
Right.
And with that, you just kind of stick with it. You just keep leaning into it. And I think it's very, it's notable how you're pointing out that relationship piece. That relationship piece is what, like actually just talking to Mary about what you've got going on in your day. Many of us fall into this trap, those of us who are consecrated to Our Lady and who do the daily rosaries for years on end, right? You just kind of like, maybe you get the Angelus in at the right times, you get the Rosary in, and maybe even the little office to the Blessed Virgin Mary. But did you ever actually like have a conversation with her all day?
Yeah.
You wanna keep that in there because it keeps it from both of those in some sense, right? Distractions and dryness.
Right. And you can never get enough, because there's some days there's some days I need to get into it more. I need to like have that conversation more kind of. But yeah, just when you get into like that, and then you try to do that with like Jesus and like some of the other saints too, like Saint Joseph, like some of the like the bigger saints of like, you know, if you had to like rank the saints in heaven. I know there was a saint who kind of listed out like the highest saints in heaven, but just even those kind of like just conversating with Mary, Jesus, and those saints, like if you can, I mean, just kind of like builds it out more than just kind of like, it builds it out into relationship. Kind of like the one thing I need to work on is relationship with my guardian angel. I keep saying I'm going to do it, but I just need to like set something up, because I don't feel like I talk to him enough, and he deserves a lot of credit, because
he put up with us our whole lives, right? Each of our guardian angels.
I think at least he's maybe hopefully happier now of where I'm headed into where I was a couple of years ago. So
it's funny, man. 2017 was the year that I really had that aha moment for myself. And I don't know that I've ever really shared this with much regularity, if at all, in the ministry, but obviously you know, we do the rosaries, right? And it's such a huge part of I don't think it's humanly calculable. Of course it's divinely calculable, like how much of our grace comes from that component of it. Like when we first introduced it, I was a little nervous, actually. Like I was like, I'm kind of sharing of my family's devotion with everyone.
Yeah.
But it was so fitting, because it's like, well, this is our Dynamis family, like, and that's what we are. That's part of what makes it so special, because the fellowship is very familial. And when I actually structured our family rosary the way that we do, and the way that we share with everyone now, you know, the guardian angel prayers in there.
Yes.
Angel of God, my guardian dear, whom God love commits me here, right? And so I actually tagged that onto the rosary circa, I don't know, July to September 2017.
Oh, wow.
When I discovered that there's a consecration to the guardian angels.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like really nervous to do it, because I already was consecrated to Our Lady. I was already consecrated to Saint Joseph. I did the 5 first Wednesdays. And consecrated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, you know, doing the 9 first Fridays, 5 first Saturdays for Our Lady, of course. And, you know, that was like 2017 was my year to do all of that, like stacking up the graces to prepare for marriage, because that's the year we got married. And, you know, part of that courting process, as you've mentioned. And so by the time I saw the guardian angels thing, I just wanted to be really cautious. And in hindsight, I'm thankful for that grace, because you do need to be careful not to be so devotion heavy that, you know, this is something that, you know, really pious Catholics, obviously very heavy in the traditional Latin Mass community, can struggle with sometimes. And if you read the big theologians throughout the centuries, like I remember reading theologians in the 1700s, they tend to quip sometimes like everyday laity that are just like taking on so many devotions. It's like, it's almost laughable, but like not at like laughing at someone's expense, but just like it's silly. It gets to a point where it's like you lose the forest for the trees, and you have to, you know, virtue lies in the mean with all things, right? Excess and deficit. And so I remember in that moment being like, I'm nervous to pray this consecration to the guardian angels, because I feel like I'm going to be tacking on yet another thing in my day that I don't know whether I'm going to be faithful to it.
Right.
And so I like waited, but then, you know, I prayed to God about it, and then I got this grace, and it was like, hey man, just tack on a couple extra prayers at the end of your daily rosaries. Your daily rosaries are already on lock for life because of your consecration to Our Lady. So if you know that you're not going to miss that, right? Like there's all kinds of techniques to get started for consecration to Our Lady in the Rosary. Like I used to set I thought of it like the Blessed Pier Giorgio, like you done messed up alarm. It's like the 10:30, 11 o'clock p.m. alarm that's like, if you haven't prayed your daily rosary yet,
now.
you're standing at the foot of your bed before you're
I
allowed
think
to
you
go
said
to sleep.
I think you've said this before, because I think it's funny. Like,
Yeah.
just-
Well, I share this with the guys in the group and the gals who want to get serious about devotion to Our Lady, because you need these like tools and techniques and life hacks to get good at it.
Right.
And part of it is incentivizing yourself not to fail,
Right.
While acknowledging your weakness and that you're prone to. And I always remember, because my wife and I were big with our devotion to Blessed Pure Giorgio Frassati, because she was on the core team when I met her for our local young adult group with that. And Pure Giorgio was well known for doing overnight adorations. And the way that he would prevent himself from falling asleep was he'd just stay standing for hours. So I was like, okay, if my homeboy can do that all night long in an adoration chapel,
I can do it for 25 minutes.
I can do, for the half hour if you're taking on these extra prayers, but I
Right.
can do that before I go to bed.
Right.
And that's what I did in my first year or so. And then I reached a point where I never needed to rely on an alarm anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you build it in.
Right.
And it just like comes a thought. It just doesn't become like I'm never going to miss this. It's just like, I've always got this on my mind.
And that's what we did with the Guardian Angel devotion.
Yeah.
It was like, if you're going to be genuinely consecrated to the Guardian Angels as per the formula that I followed, like, be mindful of your Guardian Angel every single day of your life.
Right.
And I was like, well, you know what? At the very least, I can guarantee that if I'm hitting those daily rosaries.
Yeah. And it's kind of like you said, you can't do this all at once. You kind of have to balance it out. And it's kind of like, there's a lot of things that I want to do, but I'm like looking at my time and I'm looking at like what I've already got on my plate. And I'm like, well, maybe I have to flex this until like April or something. Maybe Exodus is done. I got to have some time, flex this to April.
Yeah.
So it's kind of being prudent with your timing so that because you stack more things on, and probably each of those things you currently got have now got less full devotion to it.
Right. You have to be very careful. You got to be cautious not to sacrifice things that are conducive to your state in life. Right. So that's the balance there. And and also I think maybe this is a good time to introduce the concept of a holy no. Right. Because one thing you mentioned post 2020 was, I just started saying yes to more things. Maybe you said it in the context of taking on the rosary. Like, I just wanted to say yes to more holy, pious things. Right. And that's good. But I'll never forget early on in my young adult ministry leadership years. So when someone, older and wiser, I used to volunteer for the confirmation retreats at our seminary before it closed. And I would help out, all the leaders that would put those on. And the one person came up to me one day and was like, "Listen, Kyle, if you never say no, all of your yeses mean nothing." And I was just like, "Whoa, man, like that was deep. What does that even mean?" And then it hit year over year, and I was like, "I see it."
Yeah, because I could fully see that as well. And that's where I kind of have to be careful in terms of, there was like sometimes, it was actually back last year or so. So I'm going to do it soon, but I have not been enrolled into the scapular, but I almost wanted to be like prepared to enroll in the scapular instead of kind of like going into it, obviously I'd want to be like fully devoted to Mary and all that other things, but just kind of like, I want to be able to like fully prepare my mind to jump into such a thing. And there was kind of like that was like a place that I almost felt like, I was like, well, no for now, because like I want to do this right. And kind of like
the brown scapular, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a concession on the part of the church, and it's purely a gratuitous grace given to the recipient.
But in terms of like following through with a lot of the different things, and luckily I think I'm in a stated place where I can. I actually did get a scapular book that I want to read before I get the scapular again. I think a lot of the things in the book I might be already doing or have in mind, but just kind of like such a big thing for even just like your relationship with Mary too. You don't want to get it and kind of drop the ball, you know? So it's just like, that is something that I want to do. And now I'm kind of like trying to flex where it is, because I can wait till July. It's going to be Our Lady Mount Carmel's feast again.
Yes, July 16th.
So it's just like, well, I'm trying to figure that out internally now. But that's something that was kind of almost like a holy no, or like holy let's wait for a while kind of thing. So I was hoping to actually get enrolled by the Carmelite monasteries before they moved, and unfortunately, I called them a couple of times, wasn't able to get in contact, and then it just kind of moved. So
indeed,
I was like, I'll just have to kind of rework and refigure this out. But yeah,
Yes.
so it's good to do that in Prudence. So
Yeah, absolutely. And St. Anthony's offers it every July.
right.
Well.
So I know that's
one
going to
option.
be that I know I'll be available.
Hopefully every church in our area does. I'm not
I hope
really sure.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, it's maybe some of the stuff you don't really hear sometimes, unfortunately. Kind of
Really?
like I
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I think like you said, you can't go too devotion heavy. But maybe just kind of
Well, if you swing the pendulum too far the other way, it's being too lackadaisical or too
Right.
lax to take on any super meaningful devotion
right.
that's demanding.
Right.
Well, I don't know if that's any specific to any church. I think at the end of the day, that just comes down to individual souls.
Sure.
Right. And culture is always downstream from the head. So that's why we need to pray for our priests.
Right.
That they be holy, that they live up to their vocation and everything else. And we all know our priests are they're doing a whole lot right now in the current chapter of our diocese. And they know anyone who knows anything about this channel in particular knows that we are praying and rooting for all of them.
Right.
They are our superheroes.
Right.
I mean, we literally don't even have the sacraments without them.
Right.
So, it's amazing to reflect on how there is always a way to go deeper. And I like how you pointed out with your first Exodus, you mentioned I was conquering, chastity, which is critical. That's another that's actually cooked into the regula of the Dynamis ministry for the ecclesians who live out the fullness of the Dynamis vocation, where, we say like chastity has to come first. Because you study the saints, they say, I think to St. Teresa of Avila, I always find myself coming back to her because she's the doctor of prayer after all.
Yeah.
And, that it's either her or someone that says that you should try to focus on a virtue a year. And God grant that you have a long life, you can tackle all of them, right? But we always say chastity first in our ministry, get chastity down in all of its components, because if you're unchaste, it is categorically impossible to be a prudent person, right? The Catechism says that prudence is the charioteer of the virtues, and so you need prudence. It's knowing the right thing to do at the right time, right? Like prudent in all of its 8, integral sub virtues and the 3 non-integral, but it all together comprises prudence. It is so important to comprehend prudence because it's how you navigate all the rest of the virtues. But you have to be a chaste person as a precursor to that. So yeah, and I know I'm preaching to the Reverend at this point if we were Protestant ministers, because you got that message in Dynamis. And took that on so that you can unlock all the rest of them. So what do you think was the point where you were like, this makes sense as the thing to focus on for sanctity for my life?
Yeah. I mean, I think just in terms of chastity and how big of a role it plays, right? Like if you fall a lot in temptations and sin and you just kind of realize, hey, there's a problem here and this has got to end. And actually wanting to take it up. And then so I felt like combining that with actually Exodus was the perfect combo, because it was kind of it's a problem sometimes, it's something you have to work on, but actually fully devoting that time to work on it is kind of what Exodus allowed me to do. Kind of getting in at the time and saying, all right, we're going to work on this in Exodus. And then you take away probably everything that's tempting you. So
yes,
you take all that away and then you have that core time to work on it. It's really showed wonders. And it really actually, you get so much more respect in human dignity too.
Absolutely.
And just kind of some of the meditations that I had this last year, one of them just kind of, it was actually back to kind of how God's natural law is perfect. And when you kind of tear away all the sin, then you come to see it. So it's kind of the way that God set up man and woman. It was a very beautiful thing. And it just kind of when you're clouded with sin, you cloud all that, and that's why you see all the bogus out there these days with all that. Like,
yes, the percentage of the internet that's just filth going over that pipeline, it's just outrageous.
Right.
You say, you realize it's a problem you got to tackle. I think many people that they don't even reach that point yet.
Yeah, it's just kind of that's right. Like if they're in mortal sin, you don't have prudence, right? So it kind of goes back to that. So you don't have prudence
it's
to
like
see
a vicious cycle.
You don't see there's an issue.
Yes.
And until you see that there's an issue, and then even them, people see it's an issue, but they don't maybe put the effort into it as well. Kind of like, it's an issue, I'll worry about it later. And then just constantly in mortal sin. It's just like, it's sad. You almost need that strong witness to be able to like pull you out, or like that. Yeah, just something like strong to pull you out. And that kind of goes back to, I think, remember, like the levels of prayer, kind of you need that strong initial action to say, I want to change.
Right. Well, it starts with being shown that they exist,
mm-hmm.
and then kind of comprehending the blueprint or the map to ascend that ladder, right? And there's so many. I mean, St. Teresa of Avila is the golden standard because she became the universal doctor of the church. But you have St. John Clematis, I don't know how to say his last name, but he's got the ladder,
mm-hmm.
right, to ascend the celestial steps. I mean, there's so many different pious meditations for how to do these things. But I got to say, man, I didn't realize we were going to bring up chastity on this talk. And I have to commend you there too, man, for your heroicism and even broaching the subject.
Right.
Because, I mean, it is. It's like it's embarrassing to acknowledge when you've got that log in your eye or whatever it is, like that you've got warts, that you got a boogie hanging out of your nose, like. But it's like, but it does take a strong witness and a culture to say, hey, man, like, that's the culture of death.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and you don't, I think one of the things in the secular culture that allows for that vicious cycle to continue is this myth that there's such a thing as like a victimless crime. There is no such thing as that.
Right.
Like, because we're one mystical body. And even if you're not initiated into the mystical body of Christ by virtue of baptism, we're all children of God. So we're all interconnected in this like divine cause of chain of causation. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that really freaked me out when I realized, even just from like a spiritual warfare lens, like angels and demons and all of that stuff, like if someone's, committing the solitary sin, you think, oh, what does anybody else care what I'm doing in the privacy of my own home?
Right.
It's like, no, you're actually fueling like a diabolic kingdom when you do that, which is then becoming empowered to wreak havoc on all of us because we're all one human race. Right. We're all connected. And when people don't recognize that, they're not even going to see it as a problem.
Right.
Let alone become strong enough to fix it.
Yeah, and I think like the culture just encourages it. And that's just so sad. Like the culture is like, oh, everyone does stuff like this. Oh, it's normal to feel like this. It's normal to do this in response to this.
It's funny.
And
it's funny you're saying this right now, man. There's this article that just came out by Phil Lawler. I saw it on just the general Catholic news cycle.
Yeah.
And I want to piously challenge that it's even the culture, because I think they made a really good point. I don't remember the exact headline of their article, but the thesis was that it's not a culture war that we're in, like the way that secular society spins it to be, like it's the right versus the left or whatever, if you want to politicize it, or within the faith circles, because they were like, you reach a point where what you're up against is pure evil. And evil doesn't have a culture.
Yeah.
That blew my mind when I read that. Because and basically the conclusion of the thesis was, don't try to pit it as like a good culture or a better culture against a worse culture, like this culture of death, right? With all this porn or whatever it might be. Like, because when it's at the level of pure evil, what you're really facing is spiritual warfare. Not a culture war, but a spiritual war. And if you fail to recognize that at the outset, you're not setting yourself up for success in that war.
Right.
Which is crazy to think about. What's your hot take on that?
Yeah. I mean, many times it gets like kind of blanketed, right? Like people don't think of it as a spiritual because they don't kind of believe in the spiritual, but knowing it's kind of like an onset of a spiritual war and you need to kind of prepare yourself for battle, right? I think one of the big things in conquering it is relying on others, right? I think a big temptation is kind of like you just keep it to yourself, and everyone's kept to themselves, and you bring it up to God too. But like, if you're not intentional about like doing everything you can to stop it, kind of like arming up all the troops for the spiritual battle, then you're kind of still just relying on yourself, right? You're not kind of like, I think the biggest thing is just having people to talk to about it and having people that are also in the same spot. And I actually encourage you'd be surprised kind of how many people deal with this or have dealt with this at some time in their life,
right,
that have that knowledge about it.
Probably most of us now.
Yeah.
I mean, Our Lady in one of her approved apparitions warned that there will be almost no virgin souls left on earth. In fact, I think that was Our Lady of Good Success. Mm-hmm. Talking about the second half of the 20th century and thereafter. That's sad. I mean, you can have material virginity, but still lose formal virginity.
Mm-hmm. Is that
right?
just
if your mind isn't pure?
Right.
Right. I mean, Jesus kind of minority reported all of us, if you really think about it. You know what I mean? It's like, if you so much as think in the wrong way, you know what I mean? Like, it's a high bar, but it's a bar that can be held with God's grace nonetheless.
Yeah. So just kind of, I mean, if people have experience and if people have experience conquering it, really you should tap into those people, because if you're dealing with it and you need, when the devil has you under wraps in terms of like, he doesn't want you reaching out about this stuff. Like when you bring out like a temptation and you just bring it up to someone, that temptation loses so much power. If you just bring it to someone and say like, hey, like I'm feeling this right now, like, can we just talk a little bit and talk it out? And then you realize, wow, that was stupid. But then when you're actually keeping to yourself, you're like, this is like a huge problem right now. Like this is a big thing. So just like really calling out the devil on his temptations and his bluffs to others is really powerful. And like, that's what you really need to do. And it just comes with humility, right? Like humility, like you just say like, wow, like even if you just pick someone who's like a trusted friend, right? Like that is good enough,
And what you're describing right now is, it's one of the chapters in the Dynamis Regula where we designed this multi-step process to help people advance in the virtues. It starts with chastity. Number 2 is humility, right? Because we call it the life hack virtue. Yeah. Because I mean, if you conquer humility, it kind of like it raises your stats in all the virtues with it. Right. It's like an equalizer, and you're increasing the middle, but the rest of them are coming with you. Right. And it's like, so that's precisely why we did it, because it's like, let's level the playing field and heal someone's ability to attain prudence, and then really crank up humility, because it's just everything's the neurons are gonna start firing in the right direction. You know what I mean? Right. And so that was just with a lot of experience and a lot of just good timing, and then it all gets wrapped together when the Ecclesians got together and we said Exodus 90 is the perfect program to complement this path, because you've got your accountability partner. Exactly. And like the best thing about that is the accountability partner. I still talk to the one from the first Exodus like frequently. We still go out and do things, still connect up with each other a lot, and it's like it's building out. Maybe hopefully everyone has this experience, but you build out someone who is going to be that the person for life now. You'll be able to always rely on that person, and some of the stuff you talk about with that person is more deeper than some of the stuff you might talk about with other people. So just having that deeper connection and like knowing those different things and how you can help each other like that, it's really beneficial. And I agree, kind of having someone that you can talk to every single day. Some days might be better than others, and some days you might be struggling with something. So just kind of airing those out with them is something really strong about the program. Wow. So awesome, man. So I learned recently that you are, an avowed devotee of Saint Maria Goretti. Yes. And obviously she's well renowned for a powerful witness to forgiveness. And tell me about that, man. Yeah, so it actually stems back to a couple years ago. So in 2018, so just to revisit a little bit of my backstory, being away a little bit after confirmation,
was confirmed in 2016, and then kind of had a year or two where I kind of wasn't really going to Mass, and then kind of found my way back to Mass in 2018. Later in 2018, it was my first semester in college. We was like a religious class. I went to a school that would require that to take 2 religious courses. So this was Religious 101, and we had to basically pick a topic to do like a praesis on. So praesis is like a very fancy term for read a big article of like 15 to 30 pages, like some, I can't think of the exact word, but it's a more like critically thought out article written by someone. And you have to basically make a debrief about it. You have to like write about the summary and make a couple points into like a 3, 4, 5 page paper. So we were doing this praesis, and we had quite a bit of freedom about what to choose. So I chose the topic of, it was the article called "Some Things Were Worth Dying For," because I kind of did feel that when I was younger, and still now, right? Like choosing what are those things that are worth dying for. And within research of this article, as well as reading the article, I learned about Saint Maria Goretti. So just her backstory was that she was an Italian martyr of 11 years old when she was martyred in the early 1900s. Basically, her parents, she just lived with her mom because her father died of malaria when she was young, and she had a lot of brothers and sisters, and she was really kind of tending the household while a lot of her brothers and sisters were there because her mom was working in the fields. So she was at a very young age taking up a lot of responsibility to run the household, and then also just growing in her faith when she was young. And she was made advances on by her next door neighbor, Alessandro, who was about 8 years older than her at the time. And he basically, Maria rejected any of the advances that Alessandro was trying to make. So Alessandro ended up stabbing her 14 times, and then Maria died the next day. But before Maria died the next day, she piously forgived Alessandro and wanted him to be with her in heaven, and like wanted his conversion and faith to be stronger. And when Alessandro was in jail, he actually saw Maria and saw Maria giving, I believe, 14 flowers to represent the 14 stabs that she received. And then Alessandro,
was that like a mystical? You said he was in jail. This is after she passed?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was in prison, I think, for 27 years afterwards. And it was sometime within prison. He was very I think he was unrepentant until that moment. And he started repenting, and he actually became a lay brother sometime after his prison. And he was actually there for when Maria was canonized in Rome. It was like the 1950s or so. So he was actually out of jail by then, and he was there for the canonization. So very cool story. And kind of when I was learning about this, I just kind of saw the incredible amount of forgiveness. And I just remember at the time, I just kind of said, like, I want to have that. Forgiveness was always big on me, but I just kind of said, I want that forgiveness as well. And I want to be able to like meet Maria one day. And this was back when 2018, definitely I'm way more stronger in my faith now, but that was kind of almost like I had periods of up and down at that time. So just kind of feeling that, and then just kind of feeling that resounding thing throughout, just kind of more devotion grow to her as I went, because she was kind of really the first saint that I learned a lot about her story and just resounded with, and just the idea of forgiveness of that level. And then actually in 2020, this is actually another interesting story about how she's very connected to me a lot. Was in 2020, I used to work in a warehouse of a furniture store. And I actually met a cleaning lady who had a connection to St. Maria Goretti. And this was really obscure because this is the first time and the last time I ever saw this cleaning lady. So like she just randomly came to the store.
Real? Was she an angel?
I don't know. Because at this time too, this is 2020, and up and down in my faith, I didn't really talk about my faith in public. I kind of really kept to myself.
Sure.
And I found myself talking to her for about 30, 40 minutes just out of the blue about faith. And I was just like, I actually don't even remember how it started.
Right.
Because like, I was like, that's not what I do. Like,
Yeah.
I don't do that. So like, just to have that start and then have that at the end, that connection, because it was near the back half of our conversation that like that was brought up because we were talking about saints in some matter, and she brought that up. Like, I thought that was just crazy, just to think like kind of small world, and then really
Well,
kind
this
of
is 2020. This is the time when you're thinking like deep faith stuff is a little crazy, you know?
Yeah. So I think this was timeline wise. I think this was after I went to the March for Life.
Okay,
maybe
fair
like Feb or March.
Okay.
I can't point down when exactly 2020.
Wow, men's nights
but,
had just gotten going at that point.
Yeah, that or it was maybe right when we came back from COVID in the summer of 2020.
Oh, wait a minute. You said so. Yeah, no, we were deep into it by then.
Yeah. So 2018 was when I first learned about her. So maybe that's when
when they started, yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of like that. And then just it's been growing so much that I've also had a desire to want to go to Italy for where a lot of her martyr stuff is. And good news is actually this summer I'll be going to Italy and I'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I've been wanting to do that for quite some time now, and
dude, Italy's amazing, man.
yeah. So I'll be going to the Vatican, and then a lot of different areas there. One of the things is Loreto as well. That's where the Holy House of Our Lady is now. The final, quote unquote, final resting place. We'll see if it gets moved again.
You never know what the angels have in store.
I feel like it would be really cool if it gets moved now, though, because think about like all the, I don't know, like. Not to make it like with all the media and stuff, but like I feel like that would maybe move a lot more people. Like if it was just like on like front page of the news or something like that. Like
you would hope, man.
Yeah,
I've had to wonder why. I mean, think of the Eucharistic miracles that happen. We've had some happen in the last few years.
They just might not put it on.
People
the news.
don't. Or even if it does make it on, it just doesn't. I've had to realize like how much more so must have God felt like when Jesus walked this earth, when people rejected him and he was right in front of them.
Yeah.
You know, like how many stigmatics have walked this earth and people treated them like absolute garbage.
Right.
You know what I mean? You just never know. Or how many homeless people or, you know, like that were the lepers of society or the mentally ill or whatever it is. And we forget that Jesus said, you know, what you did to the least of these, you did to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's amazing. So yeah, even a miracle, you know, isn't enough for those who don't have the eyes to see.
Right. And yeah, it could go back to them being kind of blinded almost in terms of almost not wanting to believe or almost not like, you know, they see something like that and they got to have some sort of explanation that's not just a pure like sign of God sort of thing.
It's the culture of death, man. It's interesting the way that this episode is weaving together, because I'm thinking, okay, like for those who are lacking in the chastity, right? Like you're going to objectify other human beings.
Right.
You're going to objectify the other sex or whatever the thing is. And that's what it does. Like no one's immune from that. If you're not living a chaste lifestyle, you are wiring your brain to like objectify other human beings. Like you're going to fall into utilitarianism, which is a wicked heresy. You're going to fall into whatever. I mean, it could become very, very heinous, up to and including human trafficking today. You basically you treat someone as lesser than a human. You demoralize, you dehumanize, and that is the quintessential culture of death, right? So there's that. Now we're talking about forgiveness, right? Like I'm finding myself meditating on like, I wanted to ask you, and I'll kick it back to you in a moment here, like what was it about your relationship with Saint Maria Goretti in 2018 that what was it about that theme of forgiveness that really tugged at you? Like, did it want to make you be a better man? Was it because of your own ups and downs and thinking that God could actually forgive me? Then I think about what is the opposite of forgiveness, or what are like the behavior patterns of people that are just fundamentally failing in this regard. And it brings me back to the culture of death. It's like blackmail culture. It's grudge collectors, right? It's like people that are constantly looking for something to like try to hold over you, whether it's perceived or real. And like, as opposed to having a more like merciful or clement approach of how you perceive your fellow man, and like, and wanting to grow in relationship with someone. Because if you're just looking for like any little thing to try to hold someone down,
Right.
I mean, that's literally part and parcel of diabolic psychology. Mm-hmm. That's what the demons in hell are doing. It's this like constant hate fueled blackmail culture. Like, how do I position myself above someone else from a hatred perspective?
Right.
That's taken to its illogical conclusion, like the opposite of forgiveness.
Right.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, and it never made sense to me, because to me it was always kind of like, why do I have like, why would I hold anything against someone? Because like it just doesn't like, I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this, but like it never was like a thought to me, like kind of how like, yeah, definitely temptation wise, like when you're younger, kind of like, oh yeah, like being prideful in some sort of manners, or like to have power you need to be this over someone else, or you need to like put someone down so you can make yourself feel better.
Right.
But just kind of overall, it's just like, that's not my position to do any of that. Like, God's going to get his judgment in the end of the day. So like, why do I need to take things into my own hand, unless it's something that like, I know we've discussed kind of like a rightful vengeance.
Well, but, in the Summa Theologiae, it actually says vengeance is a virtue, which is shocking the first time I learned that.
Right.
Yeah, but that's very dependent on the circumstances, right? Prudence being what it is, and one state in life. And, because you have to be cautious, right? Temper that with recognizing, we are called to carry our crosses every day,
right?
But not other people's crosses on the battlefield necessarily, right? I mean, that's where the discernment comes in, right? Is it a Simon of Cyrene situation? What are we dealing with? Right. But in any event, yeah, I empathize with what you're saying too, man. Like, it's like some people struggle with this stuff.
Yeah, but yeah,
and we're all a remove grace away from struggling with it ourselves,
right? And that's kind of anything you build up, like you said, like it can come down in any second. You got to always be on your guard. You always got to act prudently with what you do, because you maybe think you're strong in one area, but you're like, okay, I'm strong in this area, and I'm gonna say, all right, maybe I could take. Like, why would you take any like unnecessary attacks to your fortified walls? Kind of like a like a medieval example, right? Like, why would you ever do that? Kind of like. So that's kind of like, yeah, don't stay away from the temptations to begin with. But then also just, yeah, I mean, like back to the forgiveness stuff, just kind of, I just saw like such a powerful witness, because I think kind of what I was trying to conceptualize even too, I've grown a lot in forgiveness, and I like wanted to like say the smaller things, okay, I like forgiving them, but just like even at the cost of someone's life that they died, like how? Like that is like something massive, just kind of like, yeah, like, it was almost like that. I think that was the general forgiveness was easy to always go, but maybe just comprehending that at first just kind of was like a shock, was like, oh, I never kind of thought about like such a level of that, just like actually like fully wanting the best. And that goes back to charity, like wanting the best for Alessandro, even after like she knows she's going to die, but like she knows that Alessandro is going to live, and not saying like kind of like I guess she could have said, right, like, you killed me, so it's to hell with you. You killed me, but then to like look at it in a charitable mindset, I think that was really where I saw like, wow, kind of like, why would I want to hold on to anything from someone if someone wrongs me, if I could just give it up? And then if it's something wrong and like my part, let God get the judgment in the end of the day. Like, why do I need to be like, just let it go?
Yes.
So just kind of like being able to do that has been very good, because you're sometimes always going to get flustered or mad or upset, and you just have to have an appropriate time of that emotion, and then you need to get it out of there and forgive and start. And it's kind of like not necessarily forgive and forget, because if it's something that you need to now act in prudence about how you interact with other people about it, then you need to take care of that, but to never hold that like grudge, and just kind of always be on like a good ground with those people. So it's just kind of like, I think a lot of people just get like bad pented up thoughts for others, and it's something that you should just act into charity and out of love to just get rid of it. And then you don't have to if it's gonna lead you to sin, or lead one of you guys to like scandal in a sense, you don't have to interact with this person, but why are you holding it against you? Like,
right.
It's just kind of like,
it's like telling the truth. You know, like if you just tell the truth, life is really simple.
mm-hmm.
But if you start building up lies, it's like a house of cards. It's like, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so too, like if you're a grudge collector, it's exhausting. It's like, why would you do that? It's just like, even if, because one of the, I mean, you've mentioned a number of reasons why people fall into these traps, and it's very, very lucid. Like, I think one way to kind of tie it all together is the fact, you know, recognizing that we're all on like an empathy narcissism spectrum. And particularly, you know, we all have a baseline there somewhere, and they both have pros and cons, right? Like it's an observation. It's not a judgment statement, right? Like on one side with empathy, like if you go too far, like, you know, you struggle with boundary setting or whatever the thing might be.
Right.
Right. And narcissism is like, you know, empathy is like really being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Narcissism is like being really focused. Right. And there's a point where you should be, right. Like you need to, self-preservation is important, whatever. But then of course, if you go too far, it's like, it's all about you, right.
Yeah.
Like the world revolves around you. And that's, you know, obviously imbalanced. And so you get some people that when that's more of their default, like the narcissism side, I think this is when they struggle with these things, right? Pride, of course,
right.
envy, and then like those are the more spiritual sins. And then you get all the other stuff. But like, yeah, it's just, it's exhausting though. It's even if people don't realize that. And it's sad. It's because the other thing too that's so important to recognize about forgiveness, and as you know, we covered this last year and we're about to do it again this year with every Exodus Fred have put together. One thing that I like to bring in there is the wounds series, because we all have wounding, right? Like psychological or spiritual, whatever it is. And we need to understand the anatomy of a wound and the fact that if you're holding on to it, it's just going to continue to hurt you.
Right.
And it's the same thing with an inability to forgive others. Like you have to forgive yourself, you have to forgive others, even if they're still like let's say a super narcissistic person,
right? Like
you can forgive them, but still set important boundaries or whatever. But like it doesn't mean that now they're gonna walk all over you. But like even if they don't have the comportment to like appreciate the forgiveness that you gave them.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's why a lot of people don't end up giving the forgiveness because they're like, well, they don't deserve it. Right. Like, it's not even about them at the end of the day. It's about you and God.
Right.
Right? Like, and that's why, you know, I'm sure you've heard like those stories where sometimes people experience a blockage to the point where they're like, I can't forgive that person for that because it was so evil or whatever it is.
Right.
You know, like it just hurt them so badly. The wounding is so deep. And the advice that they're given sometimes is, well, maybe you can't forgive them, but God can. So lean on him. Lean on him to do it.
Yeah. And that's kind of like another thing. Yeah. Like you mentioned this earlier, kind of like if God forgive me for my sins, why would I hold anything against anyone else? Or why would I judge anyone else?
Right.
Like I already know the sins that I've done and I'm not
put yourself
happy.
In the place of God. Good luck. And that's what every prideful sin is putting ourselves in God's place.
Yeah. So it's just like, if God can forgive me for what I'm done wrong, then like why would I ever judge someone else's sins or wrongdoings or anything they want to share or like faults like that? Like no, like you know, because it's the same thing about like kind of because you look at it that way, but you can look at it the other way too. Yeah, like God's gonna forgive them just as much too. So it's just kind of like, you know, looking at the same way in forgiveness, like you said, like if God's willing to forgive us for our faults, then why can't we forgive others for their faults too?
Amen, brother.
So
a lot of this goes back to the original sin, you know, like a lot of people fundamentally wrestle with and fail to comprehend why the fact that humankind inherited original sin. They think like, you know, Eve ate the fruit, we're getting the stomach ache, like it, and of course atheists wrestle with that and they try to throw out, you know, anybody who subscribes to theology because they think that that's absurd. But really, it's a more modern notion to just really, you know, Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, with his cogito ergo sum, had this whole like, I think therefore I am. Everything, all of reality is determined by the fact that I know that I exist and therefore everything else exists. It's super individualistic.
Right.
But before Descartes, like you think of the time of Augustine and the way that a lot of the early thinkers thought, even before Christ with the pagan philosophers, like, you know, there was this recognition that like, you know, even reason itself is the voice of the divine. I don't remember if it was Plato or Aristotle that said that, but like it's you just recognize that just by virtue of the fact that I'm a creature means I didn't choose to be here. Like I was made. And that comes with a certain, it should come with a certain humility.
Yeah.
That I'm not the center of the universe. Like I couldn't will my own existence. So I'm clearly not God.
Right.
Right. And then you throw in the original sin event. Like the reason that it was just for God to allow Adam to represent all of us is because like he was infused in his birth with preternatural gifts that were lost after the fall. Like he had a way better chance of not failing than the rest of us do.
Yeah.
And like, and when we fail to recognize that we are one race as humans, we are really similar, all of us.
Right.
Like we're family. Like, and when you're family, you should realize like, again, things like forgiveness should hopefully just kind of like, be organic and like, you know, you should want that over like grudge collecting or trying to put someone else down so that you can better yourself. That's like, not to sound too new agey, but like in the new age world, they would say that's me in another life, right? We don't exactly subscribe to that.
Yeah.
But like, if you think similarly to that, this is how the saints think. Like they're gonna rejoice in the level of beatitude that everyone has. There's no envy there,
Right?
because it's pure justice. It's like, yep, they deserved that, they deserved that, they deserved that, and then you know them too, and whatever. Like
Right.
you know, and so it's just it's a different way of thinking, and I think it brings a lot of lightness. It brings levity. It brings simplicity to be able to harness the power of forgiveness.
Yeah, and I think if you go back to just thinking of everyone, it's God's children, like you said, like we were made, like we were created. We didn't like will our own existence. Kind of like we have to act in humility and like seeing that other people are also God's creation, and like you're called to love everyone. Kind of, and that goes back to the charity. Kind of like, yeah, if you're forgiving everyone, you should also love everyone. And now, you know, now at times, right, you see a lot in, I guess now we're calling it culture of death. So like kind of seeing how.
Good point. The word culture is thrown in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to wrestle with that.
So they're kind of not wanting you to love people, and they're trying to pit people against each other. And that's kind of like, right, they got the marriage under attack, right? And they're trying to pit things against each other there. And it's just kind of like they got a whole battle plan here, and it all starts with void of any sort of charity. So I guess it's like all these virtues are under attack. You know, you can look at it as charity in one way, and you can look at humility in the other way, and you can look at chastity in the other way, and you're like, wow, they're just coming after everything here.
Yes.
And that's why we like need to rely so much on like Jesus, Mary, and Saint Joseph, and all those like as like strong examples. And like going back to that, and like going back to Adam and Eve, right? Like you said, right, Adam had a very good chance to not fall, and he fell. So it's kind of like assuming that we're gonna fall. You know, you can't ever assume that like you're gonna be fine, because you have to act in prudence in everything you do, assuming that you can fall. And right, like that's, I think, in terms of where you put yourself out there, kind of putting yourself in a good place to not be tempted to fall. Because if you think you're too powerful to fall, then like you'll probably fall.
Absolutely.
So,
pride goeth before the fall, as they say.
Yeah.
So I mean, humility every step of the way is the answer. And you know, the servant will never be greater than the master when we're talking about Jesus Christ himself here. And every second of his earthly existence was humility.
Yeah, and definitely think about that a lot, especially when I'm doing the joyful mysteries too, because that's right, the incarnation, and like when Jesus became man, and it was just like wow. And like to go to where he was born in like he deserved like everything to be like born in like the biggest palace, like filled with gold, like perfect things. And he was like, nah, I'll be born here. And like, that's okay. And like,
it's pretty nice now though, when you go there. They've got a really small entrance so that you can't bring your camels in, and
yeah.
Yes.
So, but yeah, just to like think of things that way. And then, just even just consider like Jesus' passion. Like I was actually very, good because I've been struggling a little bit with meditations, kind of the other day on, like on Tuesday, sorrowful mysteries. It was just a very good, strong meditation, and just kind of going through like the sorrow with our Lord and like with Mary, just kind of in those, in the passion, just kind of like, almost like I felt done with the rosary, and I was just like upset because I was just like, wow, like, the passion of our Lord. And I'm just like, that's maybe the emotion that should come out of the things. And just kind of, I guess, to tie it back to humility, right? To the Lord ever put himself in a scenario like that. It's just such a humbling thing. And like, if our Lord's willing to do that, then like, we gotta be willing to do a lot more than what we're doing right now,
Amen, my brother.
So maybe people are at different levels, but always picking up some sort of humility to be able to go farther and farther and farther. So
yeah, I remember when I was introduced to the Litany of Humility, or actually, but even before I had a stint with a few like non-denominational Christians before I really came full circle, thanks to Mama Mary. And it was very interesting, like learning about the different flavors of Christian expression and experientially. And I remember when there was this young man that I was looking up to at the time, and he prayed a really powerful prayer to humility, like just saying like, Jesus, strip me of all my pride, like strip me of like whatever it is that is preventing me from becoming more humble, just like throw it at me. Like, and I was just like new to prayer like that. Right. And I was like, I am terrified to like follow your example right now, sir. Like, I don't even know what would happen if I were to pray that prayer.
Right.
And obviously by God's grace, we've come a long way since then.
Right.
I learned that in the Catholic world, we have the Litany of Humility, but seriously, if you actually take seriously every word that it says, like it is meant to fleece you, like we are sheep and we need to be sheared sometimes,
right?
Because the measure of how much you love someone is how much you're willing to suffer with them, right? And, that's something I've had to learn with friendships that I thought would last longer than they did too. Like sometimes, when the going gets tough, people drop off. The floor, falls out from underneath, and you're just like, really?
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, and not even in life or death situations. Think about what our Lord went through, you know, like, but it's fascinating to think like your willingness to how much you love someone is gauged by how much you're willing to suffer for them. So when we can reach a level of humility where we're truly trying to grow deeper and deeper and deeper into it to the point of becoming like our Lord in all ways, I mean, buckle up, Buttercup. That's gonna be intense, man.
Yeah, and it's a path we should strive though, because
it's a love story.
All the saints, if you really look at them, what have they all got in common? It's all humility. And like obviously some saints are bigger in humility than other saints, but like all the saints had to have it. Like all the initial thoughts are like, I'm me and God is so powerful and is like everything and I'm nothing. Right. And when you get that unlocked and then you start like thinking of all that different things, then like a lot of things get itself sorted out, because then like you said, you're not the center of the universe. You work on the grounds of charity with others because you see how kind of lowly you are compared to God and whatnot. So it's just kind of like striving for these virtues is striving for like sanctity. And
Amen.
When you look at it that way too, I hope that strives some people to at least say like, wow, like maybe I gotta start doing something different here, because I guess, right, like we're only going to be on this earth for however long. Some people, it might be done tomorrow, some people might have 30, 40 years from now or 60. So it's kind of like we're all in different timelines here, and we need to strive that every single day is going to be our last, and how can we improve going forward.
Right.
So,
And you remind me, just to bring a full circle, of one of my favorite quotes from Saint Therese of Lisieux. She says, when one is loving, one is not calculating.
Yeah.
And you think of the grudge collectors, and you think of the people who struggle with forgiveness, and the people who, that are trying to, even up to the blackmail culture, like figuring out a way to try to have a reason to dismiss someone. You know what I mean? To just like dehumanize them in the form of neglect, right? Which is also culture of death, to do that.
Right.
That's all calculations.
Yeah. And I feel like they're almost trying to trap you in from avoiding love because it wastes your time or something, or like,
interesting.
If you kind of, I just thought of that now too, because it's kind of like, yeah, it's like I'd rather be doing something else, and I don't want to spend the time to love it. So it's a loss on my part, because I'm kind of like, there goes my time. And it's kind of like, as you grow in the virtues, if you spend more time,
it starts to become unthinkable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you just do it out of like love, like you said, no calculation. But when they're on early stages, they probably try to get you and say like, oh, you don't want to do this because it's gonna be, this is your drawback, and do you really want to give this up right now?
Well, it's self-hatred, right? Because the demons are trying to take us out. That's why with every Hail Mary, it's at the pray for me even at the hour of my death. That's the final battle, right? For your soul and your eternity. It's a kind of a huge deal. And like they're trying to make us into their image and likeness, right? They're trying to invert what God's doing, and they have self-hatred because they turned away from God, and they're fixed in evil forever. They'll never turn away from that. So that's what they're trying to make us like. So if you know anybody, if this is resonating with anybody that might be viewing or listening, that's acting this way, do what you can to shake them out of it. Like you just don't want to, you don't want to go down that road. You know, life is too precious for that nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotta pick up the sword and fight.
Amen. Yeah. Instead, do it. Love is the answer. You know what I mean? Love is the answer. Not all these calculations. So.
And that's why charity. Any way you can improve it, and that's why going back to the Exodus thing, right? You never can get enough. So tackling that and trying to tackle that, and when you tackle that, you really realize your time's not your own.
Absolutely. And we got Fiat 90, born and bred right here in Western New York for the ladies out there. And there's also Magnificat and things for the ladies to plug into. And Mike, it's been incredible seeing the progression in your faith journey over these years. And I'm so thankful to have met you. And I look forward to seeing what God's going to do in our lives moving forward, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on for this podcast today. I think it was great. And thanks for doing the great work in Dynamis, and continue to looking forward to continuing to grow with you, both on our spiritual journeys, hopefully parallel to heaven. So,
yes, 100%, brother.
Yes.
And if you enjoy content like this, we exhort you, please subscribe. For all the subscribers that are already tuning in regularly, share it, man. Share it, woman. I don't know. Come one, come all. This is for everybody. We're trying to build up the culture of life here, and we hope that you gain value. God bless you.